Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Happy Thursday to you. Today, we begin the story with a Ukrainian hero, a personalized story. This is Vladimir Kholyadinets, and I'll read his story to you. He went to the front lines in the first days of the full-scale invasion. He defended Avdiivka this whole time. On October 19th, 2023, Volodymyr went to evacuate his wounded brothers in arms while he was supporting a badly wounded person to the car. A tank shelling started and Volodymyr was killed. The last thing he did was cover the wounded soldier with his body and saved his life at the cost of his own. Glory to Ukrainian heroes. Heroyam Slava in Ukrainian. This is what we all mean when we say Heroyam Slava after Slava Ukraini. Glory to these heroes who have died defending the freedom of the Western world, the freedom of Ukraine, which is becoming more and more the same thing. And I do hope people in the West see that the same way I do. Something to balance it out. This is what I do on this channel. I don't want to traumatize people. I want to get a message through. So now we're going to watch kittens in Ukrainian trenches. Yes, I kid you not. A military blogger taking a minute of your day to show you kittens in Ukrainian trenches, in the shoes of Ukrainian soldiers. And believe me, you're gonna need it for the day, or if it's the evening for you, you're gonna need it before you go to sleep. Look, they're frying fish. Oh, good. I mean, honestly, I would eat that fish. Look at it. If I would eat like that on the front line, that would be a paradise for me. For some reason, I never see Russians making videos like this. It's always the Ukrainian soldiers who are saving the dogs and the cats and feeding them and adopting them into the trenches. So yeah, I don't feel bad at all by stealing your 60 seconds of valuable time of the day to show you this kittens in the trenches. You're welcome, my friends. Now, my friends, I'll bring you the Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, who has spoken out recently, and I'll read you a report or a quote what she said, and I do agree with most of what she says. Kaja Kallas representing a country that has a very, very long history of Russian imperialism and Russian aggression, occupation, deportations, shootings, KGB sellers, torture by the Russians, so she knows what she's speaking. The European Union should prepare for the fact that Russia is planning a long war against Ukraine. Therefore, it should develop a plan for a long struggle, including against the disinformation spread by Kremlin, and this is said by Kaja Kallas. There is no speedy victory, so we should all have a plan for a long struggle. Uncertain times are full of traps. What does she mean by these traps? And this is where it gets interesting. According to her, one such trap is the trap of hope. Namely, the false expectation of a quick end to the war. However, it's crucial to remember that Ukraine's counteroffensive has been ongoing since February 24th, 2022. While negotiations remain possible, we also hope that acknowledging successful territorial gains into the 21st century will satiate Russia's appetite. Those advocating for negotiations are keen on stabilizing relations with Russia at any cost. I do agree. Russia right now needs negotiations more than Ukraine. Ukraine needs victory. I love the quote by Zaluzhny that he's put on the flag also, that we don't need peace, we need victory, because peace would mean just the ending of hostilities so that Russians do remain in the occupied territories, but that would only mean Russia would gather strength and attack again in 10 years or 5 years. This pattern has been going on with Russia's neighboring countries the last 150, 200 years. So there's nothing new to it. The only people who don't know about this pattern and who don't see it are the people who are not living next to Russia. Perhaps people in Southern Europe, Western Europe. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just sending a message to open people's eyes. She also added that Russian leadership wants to change the perception of the war in the West by threatening and propagandizing nuclear war, which doesn't work in Estonia, not for Lithuania, Finland, Poland or Ukraine. You know why? Because nuclear war, it would be the utmost destruction. Well, for these countries I just mentioned, Russian occupation is the utmost destruction. Why can I say this? Because I know, our people know, we have lived under the Russian occupation. We know the price of it, and it is the utmost destruction of infrastructure, culture, language, and everything you hold dear. So nuclear war threats don't work on us because we're already there mentally. But they do work in the Western Europe and in America because these people just haven't had the experience to live under Russian occupation. They haven't lost anybody to Russian deportations or execution squads. So I can understand how Russian nuclear threats ignite fear in the West. This is why I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just opening up my perspective as Estonian so people in the West can also see it. This lures us into self-restraint trap driven by the fear of escalation. The fear of escalation is the biggest gain to Putin. That his adversary, the West, is afraid of escalation. Putin is not afraid of escalation. Putin wants escalation. He wins by it. The more it escalates, the fewer rules he has to follow, and he doesn't like playing by the rules. The West is afraid of escalation and therefore doesn't want to send Ukraine more ammo, more weapons, more aid. So the more Putin can make the West fear of escalation, the more he wins. And right now, unfortunately, the West, I'm not saying the Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, where I am, these countries, the Western Europe and America are afraid of escalation. And I do understand why. Again, not pointing fingers, just opening up the situation. Some argue that supporting Ukraine in its defense against aggression equals escalation. I counter this by stating that defense is not provocation, weakness is what provokes Russia. This is true, spoken like a true Estonian, because a true Estonian knows how to talk to the Russians. The mindset is different. The rules are different. In Western Europe, there is a thing called mutual respect from the start. We begin respectful conversation by listening and answering. In Russia, this is done before you speak. This is done with the eyes on the street. The weakness is smelled like sharks. If you're the weaker country, you show any way weakness, that provokes the aggressor, which is Russia, that provokes the aggressor on the street or in the country's terms to attack. This is the rules that Russia operates by. These are prison rules. These are mafia, gang rules. And if the West doesn't understand these rules, they don't understand how to counter this game. In addition, according to her, there is a trap of disinformation from the Kremlin. On the other hand, there is a conventional war against Ukraine. On the other hand, there is Kremlin's shadow war, in which disinformation and data warfare are another important front. The Kremlin's disinformation campaign reaches a huge audience through social media. It is literally in our pockets, phones and apps. It is true. There are a lot of Kremlin sympathizers in the West who have been brainwashed perfectly by the Putin's propaganda machine that Russia is upholding traditional values in Christianity, in family values. It's a conservative country. Well, these people have been lied to because they only see a very limited picture. For example, what does it mean, traditional values, in the family aspect that Putin is always selling? We have traditional family values, not like the liberal, LGBT West. Well, Putin decriminalized home violence 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That means police cannot interfere when a man is beating his wife or when a woman is beating his man. That also happens a lot in Russia, believe it or not. It does. All home violence decriminalized. And Russia is one of the leading countries in the world in home violence, meaning spouses do kill each other. There are murders. Police cannot interfere because it's a traditional family values country where in the family they will decide on their own what they do and country doesn't interfere. So in this way, in Russia, men own their wives or wives own their men. One owns the other because usually that's how it is. That's how I have seen it very common in a Russian relationship pattern. I don't think these people who sympathize with Russia as a traditional family values country want decriminalization of home or family violence. That means police cannot interfere if somebody is really hurt in a relationship. This is what Putin represents. Now, to give you a bit of an eye candy, this is a Russian truck that is transporting a damaged Russian Su-34 jet. And the truck was supposed to carry this damaged jet to the repair shop, but it was slippery and the jet is very heavy. And the truck also landed in the ditch. Couldn't stop. You can see the scratch marks right here. I mean, it's understandable. It's winter. It's very difficult to drive these things in the winter. In the Estonian army also this stuff happens, but it's just bizarre thing to look at that a huge truck is carrying an even bigger plane which is damaged and now the truck is damaged. I mean, It's a difficult task. My friends, now I'll read you a report or a thought process of Anton Heroshenko, advisory to Zelensky, of how Russia is in war with the West. And this has always been the Russian propaganda point, and up until now I have always mentioned it as a Russian propaganda point because Russia is at war with Ukraine. But my friends, I have to change my statement. I was wrong. Russia is at war with the West. Only the West doesn't know it. The West is afraid of escalation and doesn't want to admit that actually they are. The West plays the game that we are not at war with Russia. Russia plays the game that we are at war with the West. And in this game, Russia has an upper hand because they are closer to the truth. They are putting everything they have into the battlefield because they know they're facing a superior enemy. The West is not doing that because they're not taking Russia seriously enough. Oh, we're not at war with them. Let them play the game. They're at war with Ukraine. But the West needs to understand, the collective West needs to see the reality as soon as possible, not to fall behind. Most people think that Russia is afraid of NATO and would never dare to attack it. But they are wrong. With each year, each conflict it wages, Georgia, Syria, Ukraine, Russia becomes increasingly more confident. It recovers more and more quickly, finds allies to get weapons from. And this is true. Russia is not afraid of NATO. Unfortunately, as much as I would love it to be otherwise, their Russian actions show the opposite. Because the Russian western border is empty right now. If they were really afraid of the West and the Western attacks like the propaganda says, they would never take away troops from the Western border. They would never take away fighter jets, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, equipment, artillery shells, strategic stockpiles of cruise missiles. They would need it to fight the West. But since they're not afraid of NATO, they don't even care that the Western border is fully empty. They have emptied the border and sent it all to Ukraine. That means they don't even take NATO seriously. NATO, on the other hand, is very afraid of Russia, is very afraid of escalation, and is denying they are at war with Russia. In my eyes, it's a problem. We need to get to the truth faster. We need to open our eyes. This is war with Russia. Russia is a huge country with large population that is ready to fight. Mostly poor people are sent to the war in Russia. They see this as a way to earn good money. Their families are fine with the large payouts after death. Hidden mobilization of national minorities is also in full swing. Dozens of thousands of convicts were sent to the front lines with the promise of being set free if they return. Russians who have enough money to pay off their freedom feel safe. This war benefits Putin in many different ways, and one of the ways is emptying the prisons. Keeping the prisoners, feeding them, keeping them from escaping is quite expensive. Russia has a lot of prisoners, sending them to die by 50,000 to Avdiivka and Bakhmut. It just uses these prisoners as cannon fodder that otherwise would be filled with Russians who are not in prison. So in Putin's eyes, this is an epic win. In his eyes, this is a pro-gamer move. Secondly, Putin wants to Russianize Russia. Millions, tens of millions of people living in Russia don't identify as Russians. They identify as different tribes, different languages, different cultures, especially the Siberian, East Asian part of Russia. Now, these people do have the voting right in Russia. And the more of these people there are in Russia, the lesser Putin's power is. So this war gives Putin an opportunity to change the demographical situation in Russia, to increase the Russian side, Russian part, Russian culture and language and importance, and decrease everybody else, which is why mostly cultural minorities are sent to the front to die as cannon fodder. In this way, they can use them to soak up Western ammunition in Ukraine and to Russianize Russia. So by opening up what Putin wins in this war, maybe you understand, if you're living in the West, why Putin truly sees that he gains from this war and why the West needs to pick up and realize that now we need to fight back. We are at war with the Russians because they know it already, but we don't. Now I'll read you a report that opens up even more about Russian style of warfare, and we're always criticizing, including me, always criticizing how these meat wave tactics don't work. But if I just opened up what Putin gains from these meat wave tactics, he gains the fact that he's Russianizing Russia, that he's throwing away, in his eyes, human trash like convicts from the country. So in his eyes, he has a lot to win to use these tactics. Suddenly, these tactics don't seem that stupid anymore because Putin is using these tactics for his personal goals. Russia is abandoning their POWs in Ukraine, erasing records as if they never went there. This applies to both mobilized and contract soldiers. Why, you may ask? Well, because these POWs have seen the truth and contradicts every narrative the Kremlin is pushing in Russia. Russia is doing this to keep the thin veneer of great Russia from blowing up in their faces. Putin has ordered to capture more land at any cost. The cost of these advancements is so great that only 20% of infantry waves survive. The rest divided by zero or maimed. What is remarkable in this situation, Kremlin is in war economy mode. This is very important. They know they're at war with the majority of the world's military powers. Russians live in this reality right now. So they have every reason to kick in every military factory in 3 shifts. In this, they are preparing for reality, which they created, of course. But this is the reality now, that this war is between Russia and the West. And they are fully on it, fully preparing all military factories, and the new ones that they're building are working in 3 shifts. The West is asleep. In order to be able to make more of these minuscule advancements on the front. Have you noticed how Avdiivka and Bakhmut has been on the headlines for more than a year? Changes can only be seen if you zoom in on maps really close. There are no more medevacs on the front line for Russians. Their injured are treated in trenches and sent into another meat wave attack, repeating this cycle until they perish. And this is the reason why there are no more POW exchange. Kremlin wants to keep this under the lid. Of course, we have to talk about how horrible these meat wave attacks are. And I am also doing it for a year and a half, not understanding it. But now I understand it's a trap. The more we mesmerize, whoa, they're doing this, look how bad they are. And the more we accept that this is the horrible Russian way of fighting the entire West. And the more we think, what can we do against it? Not that how horrible it is. What can we do against these human wave tactics? Because we are not thinking like that right now. Only Ukraine is thinking like that. And they're alone in this. The West is not sending them enough to fight with. We need to get to the truth. We need to fight against these human wave tactics before Ukraine is the casualty in this war, and then Poland is the casualty in this war, and then the Baltics, and then America and Germany will wake up. Again, if you are from these 2 countries, I really respect you because I see how much these 2 countries have given to Ukraine, which also benefits Estonian freedom and independence. So I want to thank you, not blame fingers. But I also want to open some eyes saying that we must do more. Now, my friends, I want to butcher some Patreon names. These are the people who allow me to do what I do, because if I would have to worry more about my funding, I couldn't focus my energy into helping Ukraine and into keeping Estonia as free and independent as possible. These are my 2 main existence goals right now. And every secure net, every person who supports me is giving me an ability to focus more of my energy into the cause. Prism Ladi, Andrew Brecht, Mikhail Wickman, Mark Reierkerk. Reierkerk, what a name. Nigel Wildman. Thank you to these 5 people. And if you like my channel, you know what to do. Until my next update, my friends, which will be tomorrow. Slava Ukraini. And bye-bye.